Good evening. I want to welcome you to another segment of the Jermaine Brown Sports Talk Show. Today is Tuesday, December the 5th, 2023. Today's topic is going to be about why Zach Wilson is not an NFL quarterback or a player for that matter, and the Jets plane crashed because there was not a good captain that they held. But before I get into that, I want to talk about a previous topic that I mentioned in my last show, where I mentioned about the four teams that would make the college playoffs, in my opinion, and what I thought should have happened, and which would have been the right thing to do. The right thing to do would have had Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Florida State. That would have been the right thing to do. But when you got corruption, and I'm gonna call it corruption, it's never really the right thing because they don't ever do the right thing. They do what is beneficial to them, and it always comes down to money. And unfortunately, I had three of the four teams correct. Well, yes, I had three of the four teams correct. I had Michigan, I had Washington, and I had Texas. So those are the three. Well, I thought what they would do. So actually, I really didn't have the three of the four teams correct. I only had two of the four teams correct. I thought that they would pick Michigan, Washington, Georgia, and Alabama. So technically, I'm sorry, I did have three of the four teams correct. The only one that I had wrong was Georgia when it was Texas, because I thought they would screw Texas and they would screw Florida State. Well, Florida State did get screwed. And the fact that they would screw a Power 5 school who was undefeated just because they lost their quarterback, that was their excuse, to me is a travesty, a miscarriage of justice on the highest order. And who did they put in? Alabama. So I don't call it the college football playoffs. I call it the Alabama Invitational, which means you got to know that they're going to do everything they can to put Alabama in the playoffs and everybody else, and then they'll just pick three other teams. Now, next year it's going to go to 12 teams, but that's neither here nor there. But Florida State doesn't benefit from it. Yeah, next year doesn't help. Now, they got to go undefeated again next year or whatever. I don't know, but it's just the corruption is terrible on that. But that's not what I wanted to talk about tonight. What I want to talk about tonight is a recent report that came out by Diana Rossini, and she's a respected journalist, reporter from The Atlantic. She was recently employed by ESPN, and another report, I forgot his name, but that's neither here nor there. But they reported that the team was asking Zach Wilson to come back into play, potentially start again. And basically, he let it be known that he's reluctant to, because why? He doesn't want to get hurt, knowing that he's not going to be a Jet next year. So why take the risk? When I heard that immediately told me, well, when I first heard the report that he recently told them no thanks, but no thanks, not interested, I thought he was doing it because he was upset with the way the organization was treating him. And even though I still feel that, hey, if you're going to be on the team, you don't turn it down. When they ask you to start, you start. If you was that upset about the team jerking you around or doing whatever you felt, and you felt they was disrespecting you, what you do is you go and you ask for your release. I'm certain they would have obliged. You asked for your release, but you did not ask for your release. So if you're going to be on the team and the team asks you to start or play, you play. I'm a big fan, for those who know, I'm a big fan of that Leon commercial, the Budweiser. And if, you can look it up, you can Google it up. And those commercials are funny as hell. However, in real life, nobody wants a teammate like that. Nobody wants a guy like that on their team, where it's all about him. No. And see, that's why I say he's not an NFL player, because NFL players know Well, if you're afraid to get, okay, it's one thing to say you're not playing because you're upset at the way you've been treated. That's one thing, and that's not good. But at least you can say, "Hey, cut me, release me, whatever. I don't want to be here anymore, whatever, whatever." That's fine. That's one thing. But for you to say you don't want to get hurt, that's the risk of playing any sport, but particularly football. Okay? You're not the only one out there who's sacrificing body, limb, soul, and everything else to play that game. You got 11 guys on offense, 11 guys on defense, 11 guys on special teams. You got all these guys. Everybody who's on the team who gets on that field is at risk of getting injured and or have played injured. So you're not the first and you're not going to be the last. So if you are afraid of getting hurt, then you have no business playing in the National Football League. Go find another profession. But see, that what that statement showed me was two things. Number one, when people think, well, because he came from wealth, and the wealth that he came from before he got into the league was not from a sport or from the game of football or anything like that. It came from other businesses. And so people question, is he really committed to the game? This almost reminds me, he's almost like the modern day Matt Leinart. Now, who's this Matt Leinart guy? I remember when he had a chance to come out in 2004, and he was a quarterback for USC. And he had a chance to come out in 2004. He would have been the first overall pick. He chose not to come out. Alex Smith came out. He was the number one pick. Aaron Rodgers was like, I think, the 24th pick or something like that. But anyway, he wanted to go back to school another year and take up dance. And he was supposed to be the number one pick the following year, 2005. And I remember I said to my dad and my cousin, I want no part of him as a GM. The man is not a competitor. Because when you're going to be the number one pick, why are you going back to school another year? Now, it's one thing you say, well, I didn't like the team that was going to pick me number one. That would have been one thing, but that was not what he was saying. He just liked playing at the college level. He never wanted to grow into being an NFL player. And then lo and behold, he ended up proving me correct because he got drafted, I think, 10th or 11th, regardless, but he got drafted by the Arizona Cardinals. Denny Green, the late Denny Green, God rest his soul, drafted him. And basically, he ended up getting this moniker or this reputation of loving the lifestyle of the NFL more than the NFL, the game itself, which means, translation, he never really put in the work to become best at his craft. But what made matters worse is what he said a lot. Because go back to 2011. It was at the end of the 2010 season. And 2011, it was reported, and this came out of his mouth. Now, he was the backup in Houston, okay, behind Matt Schaub, okay? He was the backup in Houston. And if you really are a starter or a guy who loves the game of football and you want to be a starter, you're clamoring to start. If you're comfortable being the backup, then I don't really need you. Because there's always the risk that you might end up having to start. So he made the comment that Pete Carroll, who was now the coach of the Seattle Seahawks, and he was the coach of the Seattle Seahawks at the time. Now, Pete Carroll was his coach at USC, by the way. So we got to, you can see the relation. So Pete Carroll was the coach of the Seattle Seahawks in 2011, 2010, 2011. He was the coach. And he said, this came out of Matt Leinart's mouth. Pete Carroll called me and asked me to come there and start for the Seattle Seahawks. He was going to make me the starter. And he says, I turned it down because why? I want to be a starter, but I'm not ready to start at this time. I'm comfortable being the backup. And when he made that statement, I remember what I said to my dad and cousin at the time. I said, he's not going to be in the NFL long. Why? He doesn't have a competitive bone in his body. That's not a statement you make. And when you're just content on being the backup, backups a dime a dozen. Backups in the NFL are dime a dozen. Backup quarterbacks, we're talking. You're dime a dozen. Okay? I can get another backup. I don't necessarily need you. What makes you special? If you're not desiring to be the man, then there's nothing special about you. And lo and behold, a year later, they got rid of him. They more or less phased him out, and he was never to be seen again on the college level. Now he's a college analyst, and he's really good at that. But he had a potential promising NFL career that just never went, because to me, he never had that competitive fire, that dog in him. He didn't have it. And that's okay. You either have it or you don't. Now, that brings me now to Zach Wilson. When you say you do not want to start or play because you're afraid of injury, well, if I am one of those other 31 other teams, because yes, you're no longer going to be a Jet after this year. Everyone knows that. So you're going to be gone. But you got to think about the next team. And if you want to start off as the backup there and maybe eventually become a starter, you can't make statements like that. Because now, if I'm the coach or the GM of the next team or a team out there that's not the Jets, if those rumors are true, and I believe it to be true, I don't want you, because I can get another backup. Because all that tells me is you have no problem being the backup and just making a little bit of money as a backup and just doing nothing. No, that's not going to work here. If you're not trying to be the guy, I don't need another guy. I can get another guy. Okay, you're a dime a dozen, and you're not worth the headache. Okay? Now, I said all of that to say this. It's not his fault for the collapse of the New York Jets. This falls at the feet of two people and two people only. No, not the head coach, Robert Saleh. And I'm going to explain to you why in a minute. This falls at the feet of two people and two people only. Woody Johnson, who's the owner, and Joe Douglas, who's the GM. And why does this fall at their feet? Okay. You got to understand something. In the NFL, they're making rules to make the offenses much easier. So this is really now an offensive league because of the rules. Fair or not, like it or not, it is what it is. It's an offensive league. So anytime you have a good defense, you do not want to waste those years with a bad offense. Unfortunately, the Jets didn't just waste 1 year with a bad offense. Because of a bad offense, you wasted 2. What do I mean? Now, Zach is in his 3rd year. The first year, the Jets was just bad because they were building the team. Then the next year, the Jets was expected to be bad. That was last year. They were expected to be bad, but all of a sudden, the Jets was good. The Jets defense was good. It was much better, and it picked up much quicker and better than anybody anticipated. So they're like, oh my God. But unfortunately, we had bad quarterback play because of Zach Wilson. Now, last year was Zach Wilson's fault. I can't fault the Jets for last year. Okay? He was the starter, and as the starter comes certain responsibilities. And conducting yourself as a professional is one of them. And when he said after a game against New England that he didn't feel like he let the defense down after only putting up 3 points against New England, that was it. Robert Saleh was forced to bench him, which I knew was going to happen. And the players, to a man, pretty much wore a Mike effing White t-shirt, or Mike effing White, because he was the backup. Sure, at the time. That told me Zach Wilson lost the locker room. You got to get him out the locker room. That's what good organizations do. When they see they've made a mistake, they try to correct it as soon as they possibly can. They don't hold on in hopes that it fixes itself, and they don't compound the mistake. This is like, think of it this way. And I'll use the airline thing because I said the Jets didn't have a captain in the cockpit. I like to think of it as an airline, a plane. When you're going 30,000 miles up in the air or whatever, you're at the mercy of that pilot, the captain, and the co-pilot, and the plane itself. Those are the three things where you're really at the mercy of. And if the plane suffers some mechanical error or some sort of catastrophic error that does not allow the plane to operate properly, how that captain responds can save the plane or save the passengers. You might not save the plane, but you can at least save the passengers. And that's the most important thing you can do as a captain. Your job, your first job is to save the passengers and yourself. And the way you do that is to take, when you recognize there's a problem, take corrective action. One person is diagnosing the problem, the other person is flying the plane. That's why there's a co-pilot. And you might even have a navigator or somebody else in the cockpit. But you usually have a pilot and a co-pilot. Okay? Joe Douglas is the pilot. The co-pilot is Robert Saleh. You just got to know that. Joe Douglas is the pilot. He's the captain. Robert Saleh is the co-pilot. Woody Johnson is the owner of the plane or the company. So when you, at the end of last season, because you done wasted a year, my apologies. Woody Johnson took his private jet, got all the jet contingency, went and hired Nathaniel Hackett, got Robert Saleh, Joe Douglas. They even took the janitor. I'm just joking on that part, but they took everybody in the janitor. But I'm just joking on the part. But anybody who had anything to do with the Jets front office and Jets management was on that plane to fly all the way to California. Now, anybody who knows me knows I'm an Aaron Rodgers guy. I'm a fan of Aaron Rodgers, but I said the Jets was not smart to go that route. Because to me, there was a better alternative and a younger alternative in Lamar Jackson. And it's because Lamar Jackson was a free agent. What you were supposed to do was to offer him a fully guaranteed deal. And I'll get into Lamar Jackson another time. This is not about him. But it just shows you the bad decision making. And I don't want to hear this, but only Deshaun Watson got a fully guaranteed. That's not true, folks. See, this is where the media deceives and lies to you. And the NFL is lying to you if you think that Lamar Jackson, excuse me, I just had some peanuts. If Deshaun Watson is the only quarterback with a fully guaranteed deal. There was a quarterback who had a fully guaranteed deal far before Deshaun Watson. His name is Kirk Cousins. Not only did he have one fully guaranteed deal, not only did he have two, he had 3 fully guaranteed deals from the Minnesota Vikings. And no one said a word. So you could have offered that fully guaranteed deal to Lamar Jackson and put the pressure on Baltimore. I don't care. But instead, you decided to go and get an older Aaron Rodgers. And here's the problem with going and getting an older Aaron Rodgers. Because you're flying 3,000 miles across country to go and court him. What you're saying is you're giving him control of the franchise. You're putting him at the helm. And if you put him at the helm, he's going to make the decision. Whatever decision he wants. Okay, I want Nathaniel Hackett. Check. We'll hire Nathaniel Hackett. I want Alan Lazard. Let's go get Alan Lazard. I want Randall Cobb. Let's go get Aaron. We went and did everything this man wanted. And here I was excited because I said, well, even though Aaron Rodgers was not my first choice, but he is an upgrade over Zach Wilson, so I'll live with it. But I knew the ramifications and the risks here. I just didn't anticipate that it would, he would get injured 4 plays in. And but you see, the Jets made a curious decision. Instead of jettisoning Zach Wilson at the end of the season, or when they decide to fly 3,000 miles to go for Aaron Rodgers, they were supposed to jettison and get Zach Wilson out the building. But they didn't do that. They went on ahead and brought in Aaron Rodgers, and allowed Aaron Rodgers to talk them into keeping Zach Wilson. I think that was what they wanted anyway. So it was like a marriage made in heaven in their view, because they were on the same mind wavelength. Except for one thing. They decided to keep him as the backup. Okay, no problem. 4 plays in, unfortunately, Aaron Rodgers goes down with a torn Achilles. Now, that's like now the Jets is 30. They just started the season. The season just started. And they are right now in what they call a climb, getting ready to go into cruise control, or into, where you can put on the automatic pilot and just simply cruise to your destination until it's come time for you to land the plane. But you're still in the liftoff stage. And you suffered a major mechanical error. The plane is telling you, hey, you need to make some moves to save this plane. And this plane is reference to the season. And remember, Joe Douglas is the captain. So what the captain may have did, and this is just now my speculation, he calls up Woody, who's the owner of the company, and he says, Woody, we lost our key player. The plane right now is in distress because, A, we got a serious mechanical error. And Woody Johnson said, probably told him, proceed as planned. You're good, you'll make it. And Joe Douglas chose to do nothing. Or it could be Joe Douglas just decided, after Woody gave him assurances that they'll be back, oh, I'm not going to do nothing. We'll let Zach Wilson, we'll win games with defense and Zach Wilson. Well, if that didn't work last year, and what made us think it was going to work this year? And though Zach Wilson got better than he was last year, he played better than he did last year. Not enough to where you're going to keep him as your starter. Now, what would a responsible team would have done? When you lose your starter, you only got one other guy on the roster, you go and you get yourself a reliable backup. Now, this is where now things get funny. It was reported Aaron Rodgers told him, no, we can live with Zach Wilson, work with Zach Wilson, because, hey, leave him as the starter and don't bring in other words, we'll have Tim Boyle. Now, Tim Boyle, if you look at his record, was a nobody in college, and he's a nobody in the pros. So the Jets, listening to Aaron Rodgers, instead of taking corrective action and going and getting a valuable backup, somebody who could actually play in the event, it was like they didn't take into account, well, what happens if Zach Wilson get hurt? They never took that into account. You were supposed to bring in a valuable backup just for that alone. But yes, if he played poorly, at least you got an out. At least you got an option. But by you doing nothing, what Joe Douglas was telling you, and at the end of the day, this falls in his lap because you can't get rid of the owner of the company. But I could get rid of the pilot and the co-pilot. You can get rid of them. But your pilot is sitting there like, oh, well, you know what? We're going to see how this plays out, rather than taking the corrective action. And now, unfortunately, the plane is too far gone because it's stricken, and now we have crash landed when there didn't need to be a crash landing. The season could have been saved if the pilot would have taken the corrective actions, the corrective measures. And unfortunately, the co-pilot, He could. Now, some people say, well, why don't the co-pilot take control? And you can do that as long as the captain allows you to take control. The problem is the co-pilot is handicapped because of the pilot. Because the captain is saying, no, I got the control. Because generally speaking, anytime a plane gets stricken, and you could go look this up, the pilot is going to, the captain is going to say, I am in control, or I got control, something like that. Because why? He or she is the more senior person. He or she got the more experience, generally speaking, than the co-pilot. They got more experience. And so and not only that, it's their responsibility now, because if something goes wrong, people don't blame the co-pilot. People are going to blame the pilot or the captain. They don't blame the co-captain. They don't blame the captain gets the. So hey, when a plane stricken, hey, I got control. That's usually the call signal, and the co-pilot backs off and say you're in control. Okay, that's generally the way it works. Okay, and so unfortunately, the pilot, no one can speak to the pilot because the pilot is never around, but the people can speak to the co-pilot, which in this case is Robert Saleh. So when they're asking Robert Saleh, why aren't you guys bringing in a backup? Robert Saleh, the co-pilot, is forced to defend the actions of the pilot and the actions of the owner by saying, well, we like our quarterback room. We believe we can win with Zach. We just got to be better around him. And that was usually the spiel that we was getting for the first few weeks before the trade deadline, when you could have at least gotten somebody really decent. It was reported Carson Wentz begged the Jets to sign him. It was reported that other quarterbacks had asked the Jets, you know, Matt Ryan, it was reported, asked the Jets. And the Jets just kept saying no. And I think it was done for two reasons. Number one, this is what Aaron Rodgers wanted, because Aaron Rodgers had all his guys, Tim Boyle, Zach Wilson. He had his guys. And Joe Douglas wanted, because Joe Douglas really wanted to defend that number 2 pick. Now let me show you the difference of a winning organization, because the Jets is not one. There's a winning organization that did a move in the same year that Zach Wilson got drafted, which was in the 2021 draft, by the name of the San Francisco 49ers. Now, the San Francisco 49ers gave up 3 first-round picks and some other picks to move all the way up to the 3rd pick, and they ultimately drafted Trey Lance. Now, whether that's the guy they wanted or not is that the discussion of this, and that's irrelevant. But they drafted Trey Lance. And they saw a couple of years in, whether it was Trey Lance's fault or not, that's irrelevant. But they saw it wasn't going to work. So what did the 49ers do? They bailed. They didn't try to force Trey Lance to work. Or they didn't try to force Trey Lance into a situation that they knew wasn't going to work. They immediately cut bait. That's called taking corrective actions when something isn't working properly and the plane is in danger of going down. Because had they tried to force Trey Lance to work, it could have torpedoed San Francisco's season last year. Well, he got hurt last year, but it could have torpedoed it this year. But instead, what they said was, okay, we'll just trade Trey Lance. They traded him to the Dallas Cowboys, and Trey Lance is really, I think, the backup on the scout team, but that's neither here nor there for the Dallas Cowboys. But the point is, they paid much more than what the Jets paid to bring in Zach Wilson, or to get Zach Wilson, because they gave up future first-round picks that they're still paying for, by the way, to bring in Trey Lance. And it didn't work, but they cut bait early, which was the right thing to do when they knew it wasn't going to work. What did the Jets do? We're the stubborn team, and we said, no, we're going to try to force this plane. We're going to try to force this to work when we should have cut bait. That's why I say what's happening now was that it's not his fault. He was not the guy last year. He should have known he was not going to be the guy this year. But if you're going to give him a chance to see if he can succeed, you still needed to bring in somebody as a just in case. Break glass in case of emergency. You didn't do that. You just sat right on your hands. And now the Jets are sitting at like 4-6 or 4 and whatever the record is right now. We're done. The season's over. The season is literally over for us. And we could talk about Nathaniel Hackett. We could talk about this. We could talk about that. But you allowed Aaron Rodgers to basically torpedo your season. You allowed poor thinking by Joe Douglas and Woody Johnson to torpedo your season. I feel bad for Robert Saleh because Robert Saleh is the one who has to answer the questions every week. And now we found out a couple of weeks ago when the media person, and see the media, they're very slick. They ask questions in a way and to see how you respond. Because why? That gives what they call insight. So when a guy asked, and I didn't know who it was that asked the question in the press conference, what did you learn from the 2021 draft or drafting of the quarterback in the 2021? What could you have done differently? That was the question. What could you have done differently? Now, the politically correct answer would be, we did everything proper, it just didn't work. Or we did everything proper. You could have just left it that way. That would have been the politically correct answer. I have no complaints about how we did our evaluation of the 2021 draft and the quarterbacks. You could have said that. Hell, you could have even told a big bold-faced lie and said, we would have still at the time made the decision we made. Even now, yes, hindsight 2020, but it's not like the other quarterbacks has exactly stood out, the ones who were available. So, we probably would have still ended up making the same decision. You could have even told that bold-faced lie. What did Robert Saleh say? He said something that was very interesting. Joe Douglas knows my thoughts on that evaluation, and I'll leave it at that. Now, by him saying that, everyone now knows Zach Wilson was not his guy. It could have been Sam Darnold, who was currently on the roster, who the coach spoke glowingly about before they released him or traded him. It could have been Sam Darnold, or it could have been someone else like a Justin Fields or somebody. Now, I believe the Jets drafted Justin Fields. They're not in the situation they're in right now, but that's just another story for another day. But you chose Zach Wilson. But the question is, who chose Zach Wilson? Because by that coach's comment, he just let us know that they weren't on the same page when it came to that pick. So that tells me he didn't want Zach Wilson, which also tells me when they wore those Mike F. and White shirts last year, that was the ultimate and open disrespect to Zach Wilson. You were supposed to get him out of the locker room. You can best believe Robert Saleh, the head coach, or in this case, the co-pilot, wanted him out of the locker room, wanted to get him out the building. And he was basically overruled by his superiors. That's what this is telling me. Because when they asked why did they bring back Zach Wilson and not bring in somebody, as competent just in the event or even to help out, he basically told Michael Kay, because I remember it clearly, that's a good question, and I stand on the fifth. Now, that's a bad answer. You don't answer it that way. And I'm going to get to Robert Saleh in a minute, but he has to do a better job of how he handles the media. Because if there's one major complaint I have about him, that's definitely one. Matter of fact, let me get into that right now. Because I said what I needed to say. Joe Douglas and Woody Johnson destroyed this team this year. And before I get into Robert Saleh, you got to understand that in the NFL, you only got a 3-year window where you can keep a top-notch defense. Because of the way the rules are, it's hard to maintain a top-notch defense. Not only that, guys get injured and guys want to get paid. because you had a young defense. You weren't paying them no money. And when guys want to start getting paid, and you're paying Aaron Rodgers $1 gazillion, which they are, it's hard to keep everyone. The salary cap doesn't allow you to keep everyone when you're paying that quarterback that kind of money. So that means you're going to shortchange your defense, which means your defense is going to get hurt, which means it's going to be a slip, unless you are able to find other gyms in the draft and then they develop just as quick. But you're going to have to do things like that. But again, now you don't wasted 2 years of an excellent Jet defense behind a crappy offense. Now, the first year, not your fault. That happens. But this year, it is your fault because he should not have been in the building. I'm talking about Zach Wilson. Now, this brings me to Robert Saleh. I have this statement that I make to athletes all the time when they get too comfortable with the media and tell the media things that they should not tell. The media is not your friend. They'll smile with you. They'll laugh with you. They'll have a beer or whatever with you. Hell, they may even go to dinner with you. They may double date with you. But they got a job to do just like you do. And the media is not your friend. And when you do something that you should not do or say something you should not say to certain people to the media, a media member, I always say, if I was the coach or the person, I would have them write on the blackboard 100 times, the media is not your friend. Now, why do I say that? Because now I'm going to make Robert Saleh write on the blackboard 100 times, the media is not your friend. What do I mean? It just came out, and I like Joe Beningo. Joe Beningo is a popular radio host here in New York. Well, I'm no longer in New York, but he's a popular radio host in New York. Very well known. And he's friendly with Robert Saleh. Now I'm finding out too friendly. Why? Because when the Zach Wilson story started breaking and stuff like that, Joe Beningo got on The Fan, which is a popular radio station in New York. In my view, even more popular than the ESPN station, but that's neither here nor there. But he got on there with Tiki Barber and I think Evan Roberts or whoever his co-host is. And he's emotional. Joe Beningo is an emotional guy, and everyone knows this. Anybody who knows Joe Beningo knows this. He's an emotional guy. And when you are dealing with emotions, you'll say something that you should not have said. Well, it turns out that he and Robert Saleh were having private conversations. Now, generally speaking, coaches have private conversations with certain people in the media. Players have private conversations with certain people in the media. The problem is when it gets out, all hell starts to break loose. This is why you got to be careful about the conversations. And you got to know who you're conversing with. Remember, the media is not your friend. So what did Joe Beningo say? He said to Tiki and his co-host, I sent a 6-point plan to Robert Saleh on how to fix the Jets. Now, why is Joe Beningo sending a 6-point plan to an established head coach? Why is he doing that? And why is the established head coach responding? And he says, Saleh probably won't like what I got to say or what I'm about to tell you guys, but hey, he's emotional. See, and he should not have done it. If I have a private conversation with you, that's where it's supposed to stay between me and you. I'm not supposed to go and tell others. That's why it's private. Okay? So what did he say? I sent a 6-point plan on how to fix the Jets. Yada, 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 all that stuff, right? He said one of those plans was, listen, I hate Zach Wilson, but the best thing to do is restart him because he's the best guy we have, the best option we have on the team right now. And he said, and I'll never forget it because I heard it today. Are you kidding me? This is what he's saying that Robert Saleh responded back to him. Are you kidding me? Like, you got to be joking. Now, again, why is Robert Saleh talking about who should, why are you doing this to a member of the media? And do you know how bad that makes you look? Even the media, and the media loves them some Joe Beningo in New York. He's beloved. Even they said, yo, Joe, you was wrong for doing that. You know, that was a private thing between you and Saleh. You should have left it that way. Now he's trying to clean it up, but too late. Damage is done. The milk has been spilled. Once it's spilled, you can't clean it. There's nothing to do now. You can't put that back in the bottle. But then guess who took the big hit? Robert Saleh, and rightfully so. Because they're saying, why are you talking team strategy and the team or how, coaching the team from, why are you talking to Joe Beningo? You're the head coach. See, media people, including people like me, and I'm not a media person per se, I'm not in the media, but I'm just a person who likes to give my opinion. We like to think we know how to coach or we know how to play. If we knew how to coach and we know how to play, that's what we would have been doing. But we like to think we do. And we like to say, well, the coach did this wrong or the coach did that wrong. But at the end of the day, that's our opinion. We don't get fired if we're wrong. We don't get hired if we're wrong. Right or wrong, we don't get hired or fired. We don't get paid, or they get paid. Media members get paid to give their opinions. But at the end of the day, it's their opinion. But you know who gets fired? The head coach, the GM. You know who gets traded? The player. Who gets cut? The player. That's the way it happens. So it's one thing if Robert Saleh would have contacted, say, a Herm Edwards, who's in the media, or Rex Ryan, who's in the media, or Eric Mangini, or somebody who was once a head coach at the NFL level, college and or NFL level, and sought advice. That would have been one thing. That would have been one thing. Because I do know that Belichick seeks advice from and thoughts from Jimmy Johnson, because they both have admitted as much. So it's not bad to seek advice or to talk strategy if the person is done what you've done or is doing. But it's another thing when you're doing that with a person who has never been a coach at your level or on your level. What are you doing? It would have been one thing, like I said, if you would have spoke to one of those guys and they gave you advice. That's one thing, because at least they understand where you're coming from. They understand your position. Hell, it would have been okay if you would have even spoke to a former player. Though I wouldn't have done it, not as the coach, but I would have understood that. I'm not going to understand talking to somebody about what I'm doing with a person who's never played the game on the NFL level or coached on the NFL level, like going and talking to a Stephen A. Smith, for example. Why on earth would I do that? He never played at the professional level. Yes, he might have played at the collegiate level, and that was basketball, but again, at the collegiate level, not at the professional level. So why am I talking to him about strategy and what I should be doing and stuff? No, you don't do things like that. And so Robert Saleh, that is one of my main gripes about you. And also, you got to know how to look. The media in New York likes you, and I know this because I keep track. I'm a Jets fan, so I keep tabs on what's happening in New York. And not only that, I'm just a short drive away from there. So I'm able to keep tabs on what's going on. And you know the reason why the media likes you? Because you're too honest. You kind of wear your feelings on your sleeve in a sense. Your body language, everything gives it away on how you really think and feel. And when you give your press conferences, you're giving way too much information. But that's the reason why they like you. But that's the same reason why they will cut your neck when things aren't going well. They will turn on you faster than anything. That's why I say they're not your friends. And you can't treat them as your friends, because your friends, good or bad, doesn't turn on you. They don't turn on you if they're your real friends. But the media will turn on you just as quick as they are to support you, especially when you're not winning. Like, I'll give you an example. Brendan Tierney, who's a radio host in New York and a popular radio host in New York, he's more of a Zach Wilson type guy. So he wants to put a lot of the blame of the Jets' failures on the coach, saying the coach poorly coached and this, that, and the other. But he did say something that was correct. He says, why are you going to Joe Beningo and discussing strategies and stuff like that with Joe Beningo? And he said, I love Joe Beningo, but you don't discuss strategy. You know, we like to think that we know coaching and know the game, but you're supposed to know the game. You're the coach. And he was right. Now, see, if you was winning, nobody would say a word. But the problem is when you're not winning, even when they like you, they're going to have to, hey, it is what it is. This is why I say the media is not your friend. If you want to go drink beers with Joe Beningo, that's fine. But talking strategy and personnel with the man outside of the press conferences and what is publicly known is not smart nor cool. And now you're going to have some explaining to do. Because Joe Beningo put it out there for the world to know you can't stand Zach Wilson. See, we already suspected it because why? Certain statements you have made and things like that. But he came out and confirmed it. So then now, everyone now knows you can't stand Zach Wilson. And what does that put Zach Wilson in? What position? Knowing good well his bosses, the coaches and stuff, and the teammates can't stand him. Now, truthfully, the humane thing would be to say, Zach, it's been real, but we're moving on. We're going to cut you. We're going to give you a chance to sign on somewhere else or do whatever. That would have been the smart thing to have done. But the Jets, it is what it is. I want you guys, if you like the video, let me know you like it. You know, click on that subscribe button, you know, for those who haven't. And, you know, if you like it, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give me a thumbs down. You know, hey, either way, you know. And if you put a comment, I will respond as long as it makes sense. I mean, no, I'm going to respond as long as it's not disrespectful or belligerent or, foul language and all that stuff. You know, if you get like that, I'm not going to bother to respond because I'm not going to get into what I call internet fights. Because people are tough guys on the internet, but in real life, not so much. So I'm not going to do all that. But if you come with a sensible comment, good or bad, about my videos or whatever, I'll hear you out and I'll even comment. All right. Thank you very much. Have a beautiful evening.